Well, welcome, Katie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming in. I'll start off because last time, 2 years ago, when I had Ray on the podcast, I forget why I had Ray on the podcast. Ray had reached out about the kickoff cook-off to come on.
Yes.
And then at the end of it, I decided we were going to choose the United Way of Central New York to be our charity, our organization for the year. And I decided this year to go ahead and do that. So we're going to make that announcement at the beginning of the podcast.
Excellent.
That's one of the reasons why you're here.
We're so excited and grateful.
Yeah, of course. It's so we donate 20% of all of our sales to a different organization each year. I think who did we? Oh, we did. In My Father's Kitchen the first year, Helping Hounds the second year, United Way third year, Ophelia's Place last year, and now United Way again this year. So
excellent. Well, thank you.
yeah, of course. There's so much that there's so many places that need, and so many different areas that instead of just choosing one, I figured it would be best to give that money to the United Way, where you can distribute and do with that money whatever you will. So
exactly, and your dollars go a little further because we're able to give them to more places.
Right. So can you tell me a little bit, sum up what the United Way of Central New York does?
Sure. Well, the United Way of Central New York has been in this community for over 100 years. We're closing out our 100th year anniversary celebration. And what started was there was a need in the community and the government wasn't able to provide enough funding. So community leaders came together with the mayor of Syracuse at the time and pooled their resources. They asked the community to give for the benefit of the community. And so that is the mission and tradition that we have continued 100 years on. So we take our donations and we assess the needs of the community, and then we allocate the funding out to the most pressing needs in the community at that time. And needs change.
Yeah.
Constantly. So we're, constantly assessing the impact of those dollars and the outcomes and seeing if things need to be switched around and really just focusing on the well-being of the community as a whole.
Yeah. So how many different organizations or charities or programs does the United Way fund here in Central New York?
That number fluctuates each time we change up our funding cycle, but currently it is 70 programs at 28 different agencies, and that's just in Onondaga County.
Wow. That's wild.
It is.
So what constitutes, just because I'm curious, I know this sounds like an aggressive question, but what constitutes a program like being added to or removed from that list?
So the funding structure is heavily detailed and there's a big, long process. So agencies have to first apply for this fiscal and management review. So they go through this very intense process where we check all their financials, make sure they're in good standing, essentially that they're going to do what they say they're going to do with the money and that they have a good track record and history.
Okay.
We're not just giving out money to somebody who says, "Oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
Trust me."
Right.
So there's the fiscal and management review process first, and then those agencies that go through that process and come out on the other side are able to apply for specific programs. So we don't fund agencies, we fund programs.
Okay.
And so those programs also go through a review process, and they have to fit into one of our core focus areas. Right now, we're running on about 8 of those. So basic needs, housing, food insecurity, mental health, early childhood, third grade literacy. As you know, our third grade reading levels here are not good. So that's a big focus for us. Senior services, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but they have to fit into those 8 different categories to be considered. And then it's not United Way staff. It's a collection of community volunteers that assess and read each application and make decisions for the community.
Okay. Gotcha. So, for example, the food bank may not necessarily be a entity that's funded or supported by the United Way, but one of the programs within the food bank that they operate might be the thing that's funded. Is that correct?
Right. So we fund a specific program within the food bank, but we consider the food bank a partner agency because they receive funding for a specific program.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So how is that, obviously talking with Ray, the first year was the first year of the pandemic. So there was a lot of things that were happening then. And, yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about like what this middle year has been, but now I was just talking with Ray cause he was on the Steven Skinner podcast that I produce. And after that podcast, Ray was talking a little bit about some things that are happening at the United Way and just the state of, the economy and all that kind of stuff. So
It's been tough.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
It's been tough all around. I mean, it's been tough for our nonprofit partners.
Yeah.
So many of the agencies that provide human service programs and supports are having a really difficult time with staffing. It's very difficult to pay a living wage, and that is some of the hardest work. So it's a challenge in that sense. We, across the board, I think people are seeing declines in certain donations, and part of that is people losing jobs within the last few years or having to reassess their own personal funding and where they're giving their money to. Or people are trying to spread the wealth even more, right?
Yeah.
They're taking that $100 donation, and instead of giving it to one place, they're giving out $10 to 10 different places. So it's just a shifting of funds.
Yeah.
But it's been a challenge for everybody. But we've seen some good things come out of it too, and our community banded together. And even though there's more need now than there was, people are still trying to be positive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I definitely see a lot of that. Well, I take that back. I haven't seen too much of that over the past. We started last year, my friend Bud, Bud started it, and I kind of jumped on and rode his coattails. Bud started, he heard of some group called Shock and Claws. That was like just a group of friends that got together in, I think, Florida last Christmas, and they all went out to a restaurant. Each person brought $100. They paid for their meal, and then they gave the rest as a tip to the server. And so Bud did 2 of them last Christmas. I think one was November, one was December. And then I said, well, I jumped on and was like, we should make this a regular occurrence. We should do this every month and try and get as many people there as we can. And I've noticed it with us doing that each month, like that number of people coming and the amount of people that we have that are like, hey, I can't do $100, but I could do 50 or I could do 20. Is that okay? That number has also increased. And the amount of people coming has decreased. The amount of money that they've been giving has been decreasing. And I've been wondering why, so, I mean, what of those, without, talking about too more than you want or can. I'm wondering about this because I think, especially as we approach the holidays, people are probably more in the giving spirit this time of year. I think, those that are listening to this need to know, kind of how serious of a situation it is and why they need to help out more than really they have been in the past.
Well, I think it's serious for everybody.
Yeah.
And like the food bank, as an example, they are so well known locally. They are always on the receiving end of food drives and promotions and people wanting to partner with them, but there's still so much food insecurity in our community. They're doing great work and they're receiving all this wonderful assistance, but it's still not enough. And I think all of the nonprofits in our community are facing that, and not just in our community, but it extends outward across the state, across the country. And I think giving is just so important, and giving whatever you can, and I think one thing that the last few years at the United Way has taught us is that there's more than one way to give. Yes, people can give financially. You can give of your time. So one of the things we also oversee is our volunteer services. So I oversee that for United Way. We run Volunteer CNY, which is a great free online tool to match individuals and nonprofits with volunteer opportunities. And because of the pandemic, most of those volunteer activities were put on hold, with the exception of a few, mostly in the food service.
Okay.
So Samaritan Center, Meals on Wheels, they were still operating, but with lower numbers of volunteers. But now things have been opening back up, and there are a lot of places that need volunteers. So that's one way you can give.
Yeah.
You can give of your time. You can give of your talents. If you are knowledgeable in a specific field, see if you can volunteer somewhere with that.
Yeah.
One of the programs we run is the Cash Coalition. It's an initiative, and we do the free tax prep.
Okay.
So tax returns are done for free for people who meet certain eligibility requirements, but we need people to do those taxes. So that's another volunteer opportunity if you have those skills, or you can be trained to do it.
Yeah.
But especially as we move into this season of giving, there's so many different ways to get involved. We have different drives throughout the year where we collect items. That's another way to give something tangible, which people really enjoy because it's something they can see and they know that it's directly going to a person. So we have our annual care package project coming up. We're actually in the middle of it right now. And then we'll be doing a book drive for the Christmas Bureau Distribution Day next month. So those are tangible things that are making an impact.
So, when did you get started at the United Way? How long have you been there?
I have been there 4.5 years.
Okay.
And prior to that, I've been in the nonprofit world for about 11.
Okay. Yeah.
So
What did you do before the United Way?
before United Way, I actually worked for Arise, which is a local organization that receives some United Way funding, and they support people of any age with any type of disability.
Okay.
So that was really wonderful. Prior to that, I worked for a national nonprofit. So when I left there, I really wanted to focus local.
Yeah.
And I loved my time at Arise. And then it was kind of a natural transition to United Way, which is kind of the umbrella organization covering human services in our county.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How has the world of how's the nonprofit sector changed in those 11 years that you've been in it?
Wow. Well, it's
get
definitely shifted quite a bit. But I think coming from when I first started to now, there's a greater sense of people wanting to get involved with nonprofits and actively seeking out agencies that align with their core missions and values, which is really nice. And I think that people want to give. I have kids. People want their kids to get involved at a young age, which is really nice.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So more people getting involved in their specific things, things that they really are passionate about.
Yeah. Finding those passions and trying to really have an impact, especially locally. I think more and more people really want to make a difference in their community, which is really nice. It's nice to see.
Yeah.
It's nice to be on the receiving end of that as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's, I can remember I grew up in the church world, and I can remember, back in the day, the mission trips and the missionaries that would come through churches, and kind of the progression of you would get the missions letter asking for support, or the video showing their previous trip and all that kind of stuff, and I went on a couple of those trips as a teenager, and it was the thing you had to do. All right, go through the list, go email all the uncles and cousins and third cousins that you haven't talked to in years and ask them for $20. To buy your plane ticket over to Africa or wherever you were going. I can remember there was what was the name of the what was the name of that organization? There's a huge nationally well-known organization in the early 2000s that was doing a lot of work in Africa to try and rescue kids, teenagers, children that were swept up into their wars and everything.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of it for the life of me. And they were going after that famous warlord Joseph Kony.
Oh, I remember this.
right?
I was in college, I think, when this
Yeah.
was going on because I remember a very impactful video
Yes. Yeah.
that was like 20 minutes long and I had never heard of any of it.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
this is shocking. And why aren't people caring?
Yeah. I remember purchasing like the whole pack, like
Yeah.
like the T-shirt and the buttons and the stickers and all that kind of stuff, and thinking like, well, you'll have a different take on it, but thinking like that was making this massive difference. Um, and then the person that was in charge of that organization having a meltdown publicly, unfortunately. But one of the biggest things I remember taking away from that whole meltdown is their transparency over their funding. Like I remember, and I'm sure they weren't the first to do that, but it was like maybe it was the first that I remember of that organization posting like this really detailed report of everything that comes in and where it gets spent. And there was like this kind of outrage over how much of it was being spent on like not necessarily helping. It was being spent on
Like overhead and admin.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Which is like unfortunately, whatever, but it's a necessary when you're going to be, especially I'd imagine an organization or like the United Way, where so much of it is like funneling, and coordinating.
Yeah.
Because that's such a necessary part of fundraising.
Right. Well, it would be, I mean, in the grand scheme of life, it would be great if our admin costs could be super low,
Right.
but we do have to pay people.
Yeah, you want to
we
have
have to pay
admins.
our staff. But I will say, a lot of nonprofits abide by the rules
Yeah.
and post their financial statements on their website for anybody to see. And I think that's important. We want to be well respected and have good standing in the communities so that people trust us.
Yeah.
So I think we try to do a really good job of that. And I think most of our nonprofits in this community do the same.
Yeah. It has to be kind of like a seal of approval, I'd imagine, if someone's looking for an organization to give to or donate their time to or anything like that, to say if the United Way is working with them, then they must have, hit some standard, right?
Absolutely. And, because we've been in this community for so long, I do think that people recognize our name and understand that we've been here for so long, and we do our due diligence in assessing all of these agencies before handing out money.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are some of the positive stories for over the last year for, the United Way and things that have been happening in the community?
Well, some positive stories. Well, as I mentioned earlier, our care package project. So that is something we've done for years. It used to be called the Shoebox Project, and people collect personal care items, so the basic necessities, soap, shampoo, toothpaste, toothbrushes, all those things. And then they get donated, sorted, and packed into individual bags.
Yeah.
So someone will receive an actual bag with one of each item in it. And those are tangible things you can see and that we sometimes take for granted. And during the pandemic, we had no idea what the response was going to be. We were like, we're forging ahead with this project, but a lot of the ways that we received donations for that were employees giving in their workplace. So doing a drive within their office.
Yeah.
Nobody was in their office.
Yeah, right.
So how are they going to do an internal drive if nobody's going into their office and they're all working from home? So we set up an Amazon wish list, and that year we had more donations than the year prior.
Wow.
And then last year we wanted to beat that, and we made 1,000 care packages. So that's 1,000 individual shampoos,
Wow.
toothbrushes, toothpaste, everything. So this year we're trying to do even more. But that was a huge win for us. And then this past summer, we did our first day of caring. It started as part of our 100th anniversary. We wanted to have a way for the community to get involved in that celebration with us. And so we did a community-wide day of service in August. It happened to be probably the hottest day of the summer. But we had over 850 volunteers
Holy cow.
across Onondaga County and a little beyond at almost 100 different sites.
Wow.
For one day, which was amazing. The response was tremendous.
That's wild.
And it was a lot of people who are already involved and have heard of United Way, but there were a lot of people and companies that had never gotten involved with us, and it was kind of a stepping stone. We also had companies and individuals volunteer at a place they'd never heard of, and they enjoyed it so much that they signed up to be continuous volunteers even after that day. So that will now be an annual event because it went off so well.
Yeah.
But that was a huge thing, not only for United Way, but for our community. I mean, that was a big deal.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, 850 people volunteering. That's wild.
Yeah.
Do you get a lot of, or do you hear a lot of like people that are coming in wanting to start like a new organization or a new charity that are coming for advice from the United Way?
Not to me, but our president, Nancy Eaton, she's been in the nonprofit world most of her entire career. So a lot of people do come to her with those types of questions. And the nice thing about the United Way is there's the piece where we give out funding to different programs, but we are also the home of many of our community's strategic initiatives. So something like the Early Childhood Alliance, which isn't necessarily something that needs to be its own nonprofit, but it's housed under United Way. So we're the fiscal agent, so all of their funding goes through us, but they don't have to spend all of that money forming their own 501c3.
Yeah.
So we're the fiscal agent and the home of several different initiatives like that.
Okay. Yeah. So is there like an area that you think is going to increase for need over the next year?
I mean, we've already seen a huge increase in several areas. Mental health services is top of mind for everybody. And so one of the initiatives, like I was just mentioning, is 211.
Yeah.
That's the hotline you can call any time of day. Basically, if you don't need 911, you call 211. And someone will always answer the phone, and they will be able to direct you to any type of human service. So if you say, this is the issue that I'm facing, they will be able to give you contact information at a local agency that can assist you. But they've seen an increase, at least, I would say like 15% increase in mental health calls. They receive thousands and thousands and thousands of calls about housing and food insecurity. The needs are just increasing, I think, across the board, which is, I mean, we want to see them go down, but I just don't know that that's realistic right now. So all we can do is just try to continue to support the people that need those services.
Yeah. Yeah, I've used 211 in the past, or especially like the COVID year, trying to figure out where to go for a test or anything like that. And it was a great resource.
Yeah, and people utilize it all the time, and it's, I think sometimes there's misconceptions about the type of people that need help, but we all need help in different ways at different times and for different things. So it's not just food insecurity, or if you're going to be evicted. Sometimes there are people who have an elderly parent and they need to get them into some type of assisted living and they don't know where to start. 211 is a great resource. Call them. If you have a young child who isn't developing at the rate that you think they should be, call 211. They'll connect you with Help Me Grow, and they'll do a free assessment for your child, and they'll talk with you and go through the whole thing with you and let you know where they fall and if they could use some services, and then they'll connect you to those services.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
It really was just a phenomenal resource to have. And I've never heard that analogy before of if you don't need 911, call 211. It's amazing the things. I mean, not that it was a dire situation. It was trying to find where to go to get a COVID test. And these are the days before, at home COVID test and whatnot. But it was phenomenal to be able to just pick up the phone and call that and figure it out really quickly.
Exactly. It takes the work out of it for you too, or you don't have to spend as much time searching on the internet. You can just call the place that knows, right? So they were helpful with COVID tests. They were helpful with, COVID vaccines, COVID tests. As I mentioned, the free taxes. They help coordinate appointments for that. They help with the Christmas Bureau distribution and getting appointments set up to register for that. So it covers the whole spectrum of human services and human need, as long as you're not in need of 911.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, I mean, what are some of the biggest things that, the United Way is looking for? I mean, besides the obvious, money and time.
I mean, funding and monetary donations are always in need. The more money we have and that we receive, the more money we can give out into the community and help fill those gaps in funding at different agencies. And a lot of agencies that receive funding for specific programs utilize the United Way funding as a match to bring in government dollars. So that dollar can sometimes turn into 4 with that match, which is huge. I mean, it brings back a lot of money to our community. But the Care Package Project is a great way to get involved right now. We're doing that through November 20th. Okay. We're thrilled to be partnering with Wegmans again. Nice. So they have collection bins at all of their Syracuse locations. So that's a very easy way to make a difference. And it's a great way to get your kids involved too. Mm-hmm. My daughter is a Girl Scout, and last year I pitched the idea to her troop leader and they loved it. They all collected it. Then they spent one meeting sorting everything and packing. So they actually got to do the action of putting everything together. And they just loved it. It was a great way for them to learn about giving back to the community and to be able to do it themselves. Yeah. There aren't tons of volunteer opportunities for kids that are that young, right. But that's an easy way to do it. And then the Christmas Bureau Distribution Day is coming up in December with the Salvation Army, and the United Way provides books. So we provide free, brand new children's books to every child that's registered for Christmas Bureau.
Wow.
Last year we gave out 6,000.
Holy cow.
So we are in constant need of new children's books. But that's another easy way to get involved or to get your company involved. Mm-hmm. They're easy ways to show that you care.
Yeah.
And then utilizing volunteer CNY year round. Mm-hmm. It's just a great way to connect with places in the community that you might not have heard of.
Yeah. So if someone is listening to the podcast or watching, what are the ways that they could, whether it's, I guess, two answers. One, it's someone who's, owns a company or works at a company and they don't do anything right now with United Way of Central New York. How can they get involved? And then just someone who's an individual.
Call me. Just call me, email me. So my role at United Way is community engagement. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of shifted over the last few years, and now it covers all of our volunteer services, these drives and projects that we do. I also oversee our 2 affinity groups. So we have a Emerging Leaders United and Women United groups. Mm-hmm. So those are great ways for people to get involved with us and network. And we do different events with speakers and professional development, specific volunteering. And then we are really looking to meet individuals and companies where they are. I think what the last few years have shown us is that we need to adapt. Yeah. And, the traditional United Way model of giving is a workplace campaign. Mm-hmm. So my grandfather was in the late 80s, early 90s. He was the chair of the board of United Way, and I believe he was also campaign chair back then.
Oh, wow.
And so he ran Kerner Ford, and they did a United Way campaign, and it was just what you did. You checked the box, and a little bit came out of your paycheck every week, and it went right to United Way, and you didn't see it. And we still have that. So many of the companies that are involved with us, that's what they do. They do a United Way workplace campaign through payroll deduction, and it works. But that model doesn't work for everybody. Yeah. And so we're really trying to be conscious of, okay, if that doesn't work, let's meet, let's discuss what will work for you. How can we help you? How can we be a partner? How can we be a resource? So volunteering is a huge piece of that because a lot of companies are looking to get their employees involved in volunteering. There are even companies that pay their employees to volunteer, which is amazing. Yeah. And it would be great if more companies could do that. But we're always open to having a conversation. So call me.
Yeah.
Call me after Saturday. We have our gala on Saturday. So after Saturday.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming down. I appreciate it. And for everybody who's listening or watching, Again, 20% of all sales from the Eat Local card for the rest of the year, from today until the end of 2023, are donated directly to the United Way. So,
And thank you for that. That makes such a huge impact.
Yeah.
And again, it shows that there are different ways of giving,
yeah,
right?
right. My goal this year, my goal every year is $10,000, but my goal is to be able to donate $10,000 by the end of this year. So, because that's like 95% of our sales happen between today and the end of December.
Excellent.
So my hope is to be able to do that. We'll see what happens.
Well, and we'll be sure to push it on our end.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.